We're going to continue with the Mystery of Marie Rogêt by Edgar Allan Poe. This is an old story, and old stories often need unpacking. Even I read Perfumer as Performer in the last section, which I apologize for. So, we know that this story will involve the detective from the murders of the Rue Morgue, who has worked with the police several times since that happened. That the story is based on something that really happened in New York, but this is a fictional account of it, placing it in Paris. That the subject of the story is a girl named Marie Rogêt, who lived with her mother, worked at a perfume counter, and all of a sudden started disappearing for long days at a time, and on one of the times that she did this, she wound up dead. And we will pick up there. Upon the first discovery of the corpse, it was not supposed that the murderer would be able to elude for more than a very brief period the Inquisition, which was immediately set on foot. It was not until the expiration of a week that it was deemed necessary to offer a reward, and even then this reward was limited to 1,000 francs. In the meantime, the investigation proceeded with vigor, if not always with judgment, and numerous individuals were examined to no purpose, while owing to the continual absence of all clue to the mystery, the popular excitement greatly increased. At the end of the 10th day, it was thought advisable to double the sum originally proposed, and at length the second week having elapsed without leading to any discoveries, and the prejudice which always exists in Paris against the police having given vent to itself in several serious émeutes, the prefect took it upon himself to offer the sum of 20,000 francs for the conviction of the assassin, or, if more than one should prove to have been implicated, for the conviction of any one of the assassins. In the proclamation setting forth this reward, a full pardon was promised to any accomplice who should come forward with evidence against his fellow, and to the whole was appended, whether it appeared the private placard of a committee of citizens offering 10,000 francs in addition to the amount proposed by the prefecture. The entire reward thus stood at no less than 30,000 francs, which will be regarded as an extraordinary sum when we consider the humble condition of the girl and great frequency in large cities of such atrocities as the one described. No one doubted now that the mystery of this murder would be immediately brought to light. But although in one or two instances arrests were made which promised elucidation, yet nothing was elicited which could implicate the parties suspected, and they were discharged forthwith. Strange as it may appear, the 3rd week from the discovery of the body had passed without any light being thrown upon the subject, before even a rumor of the events which had so agitated the public mind reached the ears of Dupin and myself, engaged in researches which had absorbed our great attention. It had been nearly a month since either of us had gone abroad, or received a visitor, or more than glanced at the leading political articles in one of the daily papers. The first intelligence of the murder was brought to us by G. in person. He called upon us early in the afternoon of the 13th of July, 18, and remained with us until late in the night. He had been piqued by the failure of all his endeavors to ferret out the assassins. His reputation, so he said, with a peculiar Parisian air, was at stake. Even his honor was concerned. The eyes of the public were upon him, and there was really no sacrifice which he would not be willing to make for the development of the mystery. He concluded a somewhat droll speech with a compliment upon what he pleased to term the tact of Dupin, and made him a direct and certainly a liberal proposition, the precise nature of which I do not feel myself at liberty to disclose, but which had no bearing upon the proper subject of my narrative. The compliment my friend rebuked as best he could, but the proposition he accepted at once, although its advantages were altogether professional. This point being settled, the prefect broke forth at once into explanations of his own views, interspersing them with long comments upon the evidence, of which later we were not yet in possession. of which latter we were not yet in possession. He discoursed much, and beyond doubt, learnedly, while I hazarded an occasional suggestion as the night wore drowsily away. Dupin, sitting steadily in his accustomed armchair, was the embodiment of respectful attention. He wore spectacles during the whole interview, and an occasional glance beneath their green glasses, sufficed to convince me that he slept not the less soundly, because silently, throughout the 7 or 8 leaden-footed hours which immediately preceded the departure of the prefect. In the morning, I procured at the prefecture a full report of all the evidence elicited, and at the various newspaper offices a copy of every paper in which, from first to last, had been published any decisive information in regard to this sad affair. Freed from all that was positively disproved, this mass of information stood thus. Marie Rogêt left the residence of her mother in the Rue Pavie Saint-André about 9 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, June the 22nd, 18. In going out, she gave notice to a Monsieur Jacques Saint-Eustace, and to him only, of her intention to spend the day with an aunt who resided in the Rue des Dormes. The Rue des Dormes is a short and narrow but populous thoroughfare, not far from the banks of the river, and at a distance of some 2 miles, in the most direct course possible, from the pension of Madame Rogêt. Saint Eustace was the accepted suitor of Marie, and lodged as well as took his meals at the pension. He was to have gone for his betrothed at dusk, and to have escorted her home in the afternoon. However, it came on to rain heavily, and supposing that she would remain all night at her aunt's, as she had done under similar circumstances before, he did not think it necessary to keep his promise. As night drew on, Madame Rogêt, who was an infirm old lady, 70 years of age, was heard to express a fear that she should never see Marie again, but this observation attracted little attention at the time. On Monday, it was ascertained that the girl had not been to the Rue des Dormes, and when the day elapsed without further tidings of her, a tardy search was instituted at several points in the city and its environs. It was not, however, until the 4th day from the period of her disappearance that anything satisfactory was ascertained respecting her. On this day, Wednesday the 25th of June, a Monsieur Beauvais, who with a friend had been making inquiries for Marie near the Barrière du Roule, on the shore of the Seine, which is opposite the Rue Paris Saint-André, was informed that a corpse had just been towed ashore by some fishermen, who found it floating in the river. Upon seeing the body, Beauvais, after some hesitation, identified it as that of the perfumery girl. His friend recognized it more promptly. The face was suffused with dark blood, some of which issued from the mouth. No foam was seen, as in the case of the merely drowned. There was no discoloration in the cellular tissue. About the throat were bruises and impressions of fingers. The arms were bent over on the chest and were rigid. The right hand was clenched and left partially open. On the left were 2 circular excoriations, apparently the effect of ropes, or a rope in more than one volition, or of a rope in more than one volition. A part of the right wrist also was much chafed, as well as the back throughout its extent, but more especially at the shoulder blades. In bringing the body to shore, the fishermen had attached to it a rope, but none of the excoriations had been affected by this. The flesh of the neck was much swollen. There were no cuts apparent or bruises, which appeared the effect of the blows. A piece of lace was found tied so tightly around the neck as to be hidden from sight. It was completely buried in the flesh, and was fastened by a knot which lay just under the left ear. This alone would have sufficed to produce death, the medical testimony spoke confidently. of the virtuous character of the deceased. She had been subjected, it said, to brutal violence. The corpse was in such condition when found that there could have been no difficulty in its recognition by friends. The dress was much torn and otherwise disordered. In the outer garment, a slip about a foot wide had been torn upward from the bottom hem to the waist, but not torn off. It was wound 3 times around the waist and secured by a sort of hitch at the back. The dress immediately beneath the frock was of fine muslin, and from this a slip of 18 inches wide had been torn entirely out, torn very evenly and with great care. It was found around her neck, fitting loosely and secured with a hard knot. Over this muslin slip and the slip of lace, the strings of a bonnet were attached, the bonnet being appended. The knot by which the strings of the bonnet were fastened was not a lady's, but a slip of a sailor's knot. After recognition of the corpse, it was not as usual taken to the morgue, this formality being superfluous, but hastily interred not far from the spot at which it was brought ashore, through the exertions of Bouvet's. The matter was industriously hushed up as far as possible, and several days had elapsed before any public emotion resulted. A weekly paper, however, at length took up the theme. The corpse was disinterred, and a re-examination instituted, but nothing was elicited beyond what has been already noted. The clothes, however, were now submitted to the mother and friends of the deceased, and fully identified as those worn by the girl upon leaving home. Meantime, the excitement increased hourly. Several individuals were arrested and discharged. St. Eustace fell especially under suspicion, and he failed at first to give an intelligible account of his whereabouts during the Sunday on which Marie left home. Subsequently, however, he submitted to Monsieur G. affidavits accounting satisfactorily for every hour of the day in question. As time passed and no discovery ensued, 1,000 contradictory rumors were circulated, and journalists busied themselves in suggestions. Among these, the one which attracted the most notice was the idea that Marie Rogêt still lived, that the corpse found in the Seine was of some other unfortunate. It will be proper that I submit to the reader some passages which embody the suggestion alluded to. These passages are literal translations from L'Étoile, a paper conducted in general with much ability. And we will pause there.